Thank you for coming to the video. Can you tell your near-death experience? Of course. My name is James Parker, and I'm 67 years old. Life, for the most part, has been a series of routines. Married to my wife, Margaret, for 35 years, with 2 grown children who are now building lives of their own. I spent most of my working years as a mechanical engineer, solving practical problems, constructing things that worked. While I came from a religious upbringing, over the years, my faith took a back seat. I wouldn't say I lost it, but I became one of those people who only went to church on holidays or special occasions. My connection to spirituality faded as work, bills, and family life took over. I always believed in God, but I didn't think much about what came next. That was, until everything changed. It all started about a year ago. I had been experiencing heart issues for a while. Nothing too alarming at first, just a bit of arrhythmia here and there. When the doctors told me I'd need a small procedure to correct it, I wasn't too concerned. They said it was routine, and I trusted them. The surgery itself went well, and I was home within a day. But 2 days after that, everything spiraled out of control. I woke up in the middle of the night with intense pressure in my chest. At first, I thought it was normal post-surgery discomfort, but then my breathing became labored, and I could feel my heart racing erratically. I looked over at Margaret, who was already awake, sensing something was wrong. "Call 911, I gasped, as my vision blurred. She didn't hesitate. By the time the paramedics arrived, I was barely conscious, and then, just like that, my heart stopped. The moment my heart stopped, I felt something completely unexpected. All the pain and anxiety disappeared, and I found myself floating above the scene in the bedroom. It was surreal. I could see the paramedics working on my body, trying to restart my heart, while Margaret stood near the door, crying and gripping the phone in her hand. But I didn't feel any fear or sadness. It was as though I was watching someone else's life unfold before me. I felt light, almost weightless, and an incredible sense of calm washed over me. There was no panic, no urgency, just peace. It was strange to see myself from that perspective, like I was a spectator to my own life. Everything felt distant, as if the concerns and worries of the world no longer applied to me. Suddenly, I wasn't in my bedroom anymore. I found myself surrounded by a brilliant, soft light. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but warm and comforting, like being wrapped in a blanket made of love. I didn't feel alone. In fact, I felt a presence before I even saw him. Then, there he was, Jesus. He didn't look exactly like the images I'd seen in churches. He was more radiant, more real. His eyes were filled with compassion, understanding, and love, and when he looked at me, it felt like he knew everything about me, my doubts, my failures, my hopes. There was no judgment, only acceptance. He didn't speak with words, but I understood him perfectly. "It's not your time yet," he said, though his lips didn't move. "But there is something you need to understand, something you must share with others." The peace I felt in his presence was beyond anything I had ever experienced. I wanted to stay there forever. Without warning, the light faded, and Jesus led me to a place that was dark and oppressive. It was as if we had descended into the depths of despair. I quickly realized that we were in hell, though it didn't look like the fire and brimstone scenes I had imagined. It was worse in a way, an emptiness, a void where the souls of the lost suffered. I could feel their anguish, hear their cries of regret. It was unbearable to witness, and I looked to Jesus, who simply said, "This is what happens when people turn away from love and God." The souls I saw weren't being punished by demons. They were tormented by their own choices, their separation from the divine. The message was clear. This was the fate of those who chose a life without God's love, without faith. After what felt like an eternity in that dark place, the atmosphere shifted again. Light surrounded us, and suddenly we were in a place that radiated beauty and peace beyond description. This was heaven. Everything was more vivid, the colors, the air, the feeling of pure joy that enveloped me. I saw gardens so perfect that each blade of grass seemed to sing, rivers clearer than any water on earth, and angels whose harmonies filled the space with music that stirred my soul. Jesus smiled and said, This is where your spirit belongs. This is the promise for those who follow me. The peace I felt here was indescribable. It was as if I had returned to the place I was always meant to be, a home I had long forgotten. Just as I was beginning to absorb the beauty around me, Jesus turned to me and said, "There is something more you must see." The scene shifted once again. This time, I found myself witnessing a vision of the future. I saw a man rise to power. He was charismatic, beloved by many, and people flocked to him as if he were a savior. But there was something unsettling about him. Despite his charm, there was darkness in his heart. Jesus revealed to me that this man was the Antichrist, deceiving the world with his false promises of peace and unity. Nations gathered around him, believing he had the answers to the world's problems, but in reality, he was leading them toward destruction. I saw him manipulate world leaders, particularly focusing on the Middle East, where he orchestrated events that fulfilled ancient prophecies. Jesus warned, "Many will follow him, but they must be careful not to be deceived." In that moment, I understood why I had been shown these visions. Jesus told me, "You must return and share this message. People need to know the dangers of deception, and they must be vigilant in their faith." It became clear that my mission was not just to warn people about the Antichrist, but to remind them of the importance of love, faith, and staying close to God. Jesus emphasized that prayer and spiritual connection were the keys to overcoming the darkness that would soon envelop the world. I felt an immense responsibility settle over me, knowing that I had been entrusted with this knowledge and not for my own benefit, but for the sake of others. I promised him that I would share what I had seen. Then, as quickly as I had left, I was pulled back to my body. The transition was abrupt and jarring. I felt a cold shock as I gasped for breath, the sterile hospital room coming into focus. My chest hurt, and I could hear the machines beeping around me. My wife was there, her eyes wide with relief as she saw me stir. "James, you're back," she whispered, clutching my hand. I was filled with an overwhelming sense of love for her and our family, but also a renewed sense of purpose. I had been given a second chance, and I knew that I couldn't waste it. My mission was clear. I had to share what I had experienced. At first, when I began telling my family and friends about my experience, there were mixed reactions. My wife listened intently, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. My children were more skeptical, though they didn't say it outright. Some of my friends were deeply moved, while others questioned how something like this could be possible. It was difficult at first, trying to explain what I had seen in words that could capture the gravity of the experience. But I didn't take their skepticism personally. I knew that my journey had been deeply personal, and that not everyone would be able to grasp it right away. All I could do was share my truth and hope that it would resonate with those who needed to hear it. Since that day, my entire outlook on life has changed. I became much more engaged in my spiritual life, attending church regularly and sharing my experiences in small groups. I also started volunteering more, feeling called to help those who were lost or in need. I see every day as an opportunity to live with purpose and love. I now encourage others to reconnect with their faith, to seek out their own spiritual journeys, and to never take their time here for granted. My experience gave me clarity on what truly matters: love, kindness, and our connection to God. The message I want to leave with everyone is this: don't wait for a moment like mine to realize the importance of faith. Life is fragile, and our time here is precious. Stay close to God, pray, and nurture your spiritual connections. In a world full of distractions and false promises, it's easy to lose sight of what truly matters, but love, kindness, and faith will always guide you home. Even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. We are all deeply loved, and it's our responsibility to share that love with others. My name is John Taylor, and I'm 72 years old. I've lived a life full of ups and downs, like most people. I worked as a high school teacher for over 40 years, married my college sweetheart, Ellen, and we raised 4 children together. For most of my life, I was content with how things were going. But as the years went on, something shifted. I became more focused on the day-to-day routine, drifting away from the deeper, spiritual aspects of life. I grew up in a religious household, attending church every Sunday, but as I got older, faith became less of a priority. My career, family, and hobbies took center stage, and I rarely thought about God or what might happen after death. Little did I know, that would soon change. Everything started after I underwent a relatively simple heart surgery. I had been diagnosed with a blockage, and the doctors assured me it was a common procedure, nothing to worry about. Ellen and I were confident that things would go smoothly. The surgery itself went well, and I was home resting just 2 days later. But about a week after, something went terribly wrong. One evening, I began to feel an overwhelming pressure in my chest, much worse than what I had felt before the surgery. My heart felt like it was seizing up. Ellen was in the kitchen, and I barely managed to call out to her. She came rushing in, and when she saw me clutching my chest, she immediately called 911. I could see the fear in her eyes as she held my hand, but before the paramedics arrived, everything went black. My heart had stopped. At that moment, I experienced something extraordinary. 1 minute, I was in excruciating pain, and the next, I was free from it all. I found myself floating above my own body. I could see Ellen kneeling next to me, shaking me, and I saw the paramedics storm into the room. They worked quickly, moving around my lifeless body, but I wasn't scared. In fact, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. It was as though I had let go of everything: fear, pain, worry. None of it mattered anymore. I watched the scene below with a calm detachment. My body felt distant, like it was no longer a part of me. I realized then that I was no longer bound to it. I was hovering above, watching, but feeling utterly free. As I floated, something incredible happened. The room around me began to dissolve, and I found myself in a vast expanse of pure light. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It was soft and warm, like stepping into a place filled with love. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, this glowing light that seemed to stretch forever. And then, I felt His presence. Jesus stood before me, not as a figure from a painting or a statue, but real, radiant, and alive. His face was kind, full of love and understanding. His eyes, when they met mine, seemed to look straight into my soul, knowing everything about me, my triumphs, my failures, my doubts. But there was no judgment, only love. He didn't speak in words, but I understood Him clearly. "It's not your time yet," He said in my heart, "but there is something you need to understand, and something you must share with others." Jesus took my hand, and the light around us faded as He led me to a place darker than anything I had ever experienced. I quickly realized it was hell. It wasn't flames or brimstone, but something far worse: emptiness. A deep, soul-crushing void filled with lost souls. I could feel their despair, their regrets. I saw them wandering, crying out for redemption that would never come. It was as if they were imprisoned by their own choices, by the life they had led away from love and God. Jesus didn't need to say anything. I understood immediately. This was the fate of those who had turned away from love, from faith, from the path of light. It was a warning, a reminder that the choices we make on earth echo far beyond. Suddenly, the darkness faded, and I was taken to a place filled with an overwhelming sense of peace and beauty: heaven. The colors were brighter, more vivid than anything I'd seen on earth. The trees, the rivers, the sky, everything radiated perfection. I heard angels singing in perfect harmony, their voices blending into a melody that filled my heart with joy. Jesus looked at me and said, "This is the place I have prepared for those who follow me." I felt a deep connection to everything around me, like I belonged there. The peace was indescribable, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly home. I wanted to stay there forever. Just as I was beginning to absorb the beauty of heaven, Jesus told me there was more to see. He showed me a vision of the future, of a man who would rise to great power. At first, this man seemed kind, charismatic, and capable. He promised peace and prosperity, and people followed him eagerly. But as I looked deeper, I saw the truth. This man was the Antichrist, deceiving the world with false promises. Jesus revealed that many would follow him, blinded by his charm, not realizing the darkness that lay within. He manipulated world leaders, particularly focusing on the tensions in the Middle East. I saw the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, and I knew that ancient prophecies were being fulfilled. Jesus warned me that people needed to be vigilant, to stay true to their faith, and not be deceived by the allure of false saviors. The vision ended, and I understood why I had been shown these things. Jesus told me, "You must return and share what you have seen. The world must be prepared for what is to come." People need to reconnect with their faith, to stay close to God, and to be ready for the challenges ahead. His words were clear. It was my mission to help others understand the importance of love, faith, and truth. Jesus emphasized the power of prayer and the need for people to turn their hearts back to God. I felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility, knowing that I had been given this knowledge and not for myself, but for others. I promised him that I would share it. The next moment, I was being pulled back into my body. The transition was abrupt, and I felt the cold, harsh reality of the hospital room as I gasped for breath. My chest ached, and I heard the machines beeping around me. Ellen was beside me, her face filled with relief as she realized I had come back. "John, you're okay," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I held her hand tightly, filled with love for her and our family, but also with the weight of the mission that lay ahead. I had been given a second chance, and I knew I couldn't waste it. I had to share what I had seen, what I had learned. At first, it wasn't easy. When I told my family and friends about my experience, their reactions were mixed. Some believed me instantly, while others were skeptical. My children were supportive but didn't fully understand. Some of my friends were moved by my story, but others questioned whether it was real or just a hallucination from the surgery. It was hard to put into words what I had seen and felt, but I didn't let the doubt of others shake me. I knew what I had experienced was real, and I was determined to fulfill the mission Jesus had given me. Since that day, my life has completely changed. I'm more connected to my faith than I've ever been. I attend church regularly, and I share my experience with small groups, hoping to inspire others to look beyond the material world and focus on their spiritual journey. I've also become more involved in helping others, volunteering at local shelters and giving back to the community in any way I can. I know now that every day is a gift, and I want to live it with purpose, love, and kindness. My experience taught me that the most important things in life aren't possessions or achievements, but love, faith, and the relationships we build with others. The message I want to leave with everyone is this: don't wait for a near-death experience to reconnect with your faith. Life is short, and our time here is precious. Love your family, stay close to God, and don't let the distractions of the world pull you away from what truly matters. In the end, it's love and faith that will carry you through, and those are the things that will last forever. Even in the darkest times, there is always hope, and God's love is always there, waiting for us to turn back to Him.